and welcome to another Deck Tech episode. I'm your host, Nick Papadopoulos, and we will be looking over Nicol Bolas, the Ravager, and what cards and strategies we should include. Nicol Bolas is one of Magic the Gathering's most iconic characters. He's been printed and reprinted in many different iterations. The most recent and my favorite is Nicol Bolas the Ravager. In this iteration, he is both creature and planeswalker. His converted mana cost is a colorless, a blue, a black, and a red. He has flying on a 4/4 body and has 2 unique abilities. When Nicol Bolas the Ravager enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card, as well as an activated ability. For 4 colorless, a blue, a black, and a red, he transforms into his true form, Nicol Bolas the Arisen. When he transforms, he turns into a planeswalker with 7 loyalty counters and opens up a ton of new abilities. His first ability is +2, draw 2 cards. Having an inbuilt draw engine sounds fantastic, but for the 7 mana we just spent to transform him seems a little underwhelming. If you plan on using this ability right away, make sure you have a blocker. His second ability is -3, deal 10 damage to target creature or planeswalker. This is a great ability because it's instant threat removal. Planeswalkers have nowhere to hide from Nicol Bolas, which feels so thematic, as well as dealing with pesky creatures who can swing in and kill your nuke planeswalker. His third ability, -4, put a planeswalker or creature from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the moment we've waited for. Nothing is sweeter than dealing with your opponent's threats, only to put them under your control. I absolutely love this ability. It's like, oh, you know, your poor Avacyn in your graveyard, she deserved better than to end up there. Yoink. The ability is just nuts. I've seen players quit because they worked so hard to get rid of a creature or planeswalker for it only to end up on our side. And finally, his last ability, and one of the most rage-inducing abilities I have ever seen. -12, exile all but the bottom card of target player's deck. Now, it's very rare to get this ability off. Each of your opponents will be aiming to get rid of your planeswalker. If you do get the opportunity, you have to pick the target properly. Think about who has the most board presence or a combo win possibly. Don't just pick the guy who is swinging at you the most or destroyed your enchantment last turn. This is typically a game eliminating ability, so proper threat assessment is required. Knowledge of how certain commanders are built really comes into play here. Now that we know a little bit more about everyone's favorite Elder Dragon, let's talk about how the deck is designed and how to utilize your cards. First and foremost, we'll be playing with a lot of control cards. Nicol Bolas is well known, and judging by his abilities, for being a bit of a control freak. Knowing this, what kind of control cards should we use? We will be going the route of stealing cards from graveyards, the battlefield, and your opponent's deck in hand. Nowhere will be safe from the prying eyes of Nicol Bolas. So first up, let's talk about the creatures we will be running. The first card is Gilded Drake. When Gilded Drake enters the battlefield, exchange control with target creature and opponent controls. This creature gets Nicol Bolas and all his horribly awesome plans. For a colorless and a blue, we exchange control of any creature. That's 2 converted mana costs. It's like, hey, I really like what your commander does, but I feel like I could use it better. Nightveil Spectre is an excellent card. Exiling cards from your opponent's deck is nasty, but it's even better when you get to play those cards. This is almost as good as drawing cards. Keeps your hand full and utilizing cards from your opponent's deck. My favorite part is that you don't even need to play the card that is exiled. If you know it's part of someone's combo or just don't want it in your opponent's graveyard, just don't cast it. Next up, we have Thada Adel Acquisitor. Nothing is more rewarding than going into a Teferi Temporal Archmage deck and stealing his Chain Veil. Thada Adel is a great card for us. It allows us to further increase our mana base by stealing mana rocks, breaking combos, or just grabbing board presence. Again, you can leave these cards in exile so that your opponents can't use them. I love using Aura Thief when I am facing a heavy enchantment themed deck. Stealing all those enchantments is so rewarding. He can be used as a defender to thwart off attacks, or used in a combo to gain advantage. There was this one game that I won with this creature because one of my opponents used Enchanted Evening, paired with a card that shrouded all their enchantments so that no one could single target their board. I brought in Aura Thief and killed him off with my commander and stole the entire board. Nuts, it was just insane value. Next up, we have Gonti, Lord of Luxury. this card is great. Looking at the top 4 cards of your opponent's deck and picking one to cast or exile from the game is another great addition to this deck. This card is particularly powerful when an opponent has tutored for a card and put that card on top or rearrange the top of their deck. And last but not least, Empress Galena. There are theft decks literally just designed around Empress Galena, and as such is an auto include into this deck. Being able to steal any legendary permanent, yes, permanent, not just creature, is just so much value that you just cannot pass off. Next, we're going to look at the enchantments, instants, and sorcery spells we run to gain control and advantage over our opponents. First up is Dead Man's Chest. It pairs really well with our commander in his Planeswalker form. It allows us to enchant a high-powered creature and exile a bunch of cards off the top of our opponent's deck that we get to cast afterwards. Another great addition to the deck is Steel Enchantment. Straightforward, an opponent plays an enchantment that we like, so we take it. Great if there are cards like Smothering Tith, Rhystic Study, or even Sylvan Library. One of the best control cards we can include in a deck like this is Steel Artifact. A lot of combos are oriented around artifacts. If you start noticing one of your opponents stockpiling these pesky artifacts, might not be a bad idea to steal one of them. Now, Treachery is the best gain control of target creature card in Magic the Gathering. You can use this as a ramp if you have lands tapping for multiple mana, or just gain a free creature. Bribery is another great addition to this deck. Nothing is quite like stealing a big Eldrazi from one of your opponent's decks. Last but not least, we have Memory Blunder. Notice an awesome instant or sorcery in your opponent's graveyard? Sounds like a great way to turn the game to your advantage. I was facing one opponent who had used Rise of the Dark Realms, and the next opponent had a board wipe. At the end step before my turn, I used Memory Blunder to take all those creatures from my opponent's graveyard under my control. Nothing like a 9 converted mana cost spell for only 4. We also run a small graveyard package. We run Reanimate, Dance of the Dead, Necromancy, and of course, Animate Dead. Our graveyard package is simple and straightforward. Creatures are going to die, and we may want those creatures under our control. Just another great way to get ahead. So, outside of our control spells, how do we win with this deck? Well, I have included 3 spells from each color that offer different ways to win. First up, we run Expropriate. Expropriate is extremely powerful to the point where I haven't lost a game after I cast this. This card can go so many ways, but the one way you want is to get all those extra turns. You guarantee yourself 1 extra turn, and if any of your opponents allow you an extra turn, it can really put a hurting in. Otherwise, you get to steal a permanent. Next up, we have Insurrection. Gaining control of all creatures and swinging in at their opponents is usually game ending. Even if you can only knock out a few, it leaves that last opponent weak and to your advantage. And last but not least, we have Rise of the Dark Realms. Putting all the creatures from all graveyards under your control, you gain the benefit of any and all enter the battlefield triggers, as well as a potential game-winning board state. Now, we also run one more win con, and it's a very special win con that depends highly on what's in your opponent's graveyards. Mnemonic Betrayal requires building up an infinite mana combo, which is easily done with Paradox Engine and an assortment of mana rocks. Casting the cards will allow you to untap your mana rocks, allowing you to keep casting out of your opponent's graveyard. Getting cards into your opponent's graveyards, though, may not be all that easy, so we run a few wheel cards such as Wheel of Fate, Windfall, and Reforge the Soul. We can also pair this with Cyclonic Rift, which will bounce back all their non-land permanents, and then wheel them, which will put all their goodies in their hands in their graveyard. Alright folks, let's talk about the pros and cons of our deck design. Pro number 1, we play with our opponent's deck as well as our own. Not only can we win with our deck, but we have the opportunity to win with their deck as well. It gives us a lot of opportunities to stay ahead of our opponent. Pro number 2, consistency. This deck plays very consistent. I have played with this deck so many times, and because we have it stuffed with so many cards with similar effects, it just really plays nicely. And pro number 3, our deck has a ton of value. Our deck pulls a lot of value just because we get to take our opponent's permanents and spells. Let's go over our cons. Con number 1, decks that can consistently have plays on turn 1 to 3. Any deck that has really good tempo like Edgar Markov or elf-themed decks typically can take out our commander when he transforms very, very easily. Con number 2, improperly assessing a threat. We gain control of many targets, but taking the wrong one can backlash on us. Well, that's it for this week's Deck Tech. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I have. If you have any particular deck you would like to see built, play tested, or reviewed, hit me up in the comments below. Also, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe.